at Section 3 of Chapter 29 as far as the Allied advance on the Axis powers in Europe. As always, we'll start with our key terms. Rosie the Riveter. Go ahead, Mr. Shovels.
High-grading for women who worked in war industries during World War II.
Very good. Now, the big idea here is embodied the spirit and dedication that the women are providing. And this ceiling tile here does it as well. This is the most popular image that you all can see. As far as with the bandana, bicep clenched, we can do it. Okay, it's empowering women to aid the war effort. They were so important to our economy as well as the military effort as a whole. Aircraft carrier. Mr. Sullivan?
Ships that transport aircraft and accommodate the takeoff and landing of planes.
Very good. And these ships are massive. A lot of people would argue that they're almost like aquatic mobile cities as far as the amount of crew that's on board and the devastation that they can bring about. Now, aircraft carriers are going to be exceptionally important in which theater of the war?
Pacific.
The Pacific. Very good. Familiarize yourself with that. Theater. Okay? Now, with the attack on Pearl Harbor, which you guys watched the other day, the main reason that that wasn't a total catastrophic loss because the majority of our aircraft carriers were out to sea. Had they have been in Battleship Row as well, you can imagine how impactful we would have been against the Empire of Japan. Dwight Eisenhower. Mr. Schultz?
American general took command of a joint British and American force in Morocco and Algeria.
Very good. Now, eventually he will become a president. True or false?
True.
True. Okay. This guy is the last remaining 5-star general that we've had in our military. Hopefully we never have another situation where we need someone of such prestige. Okay? And consider this. This is basically the gentleman who's in charge of the whole Allied war effort. Okay? He's number one, just below those political leaders. Battle of Stalingrad. Go ahead.
Coolest battle of the war aimed for rich oil fields in the south.
Good. The major thing of this is it halts the German expansion in Europe, moving eastward. That's the biggest and most important idea there. Now, just as any other battle involving the Soviet Union, Mother Nature also helps with this as well. Obviously, if you're familiar with the Soviet environment, it's very, very cold during the winter, and it's very hard to fight a battle or fight war during that as well. D-Day. Up front, go ahead.
Codenamed for June 6, 1944, the day that Allied forces invaded France during World War II.
Perfect. Its actual name is Operation Overlord. Okay, so maybe you've heard that before. That is what it's describing. Storming the beaches of Normandy, which is a coastline in France. There's excellent footage if you look this up online. The big thing with the D-Day invasion you have to understand is the Axis powers, the German forces, are up on a cliff face, facing down onto the beach. So they did have a tactical advantage, though we are still victorious. Yalta Conference. Go ahead.
Meeting between Churchill, Roosevelt, and Stalin in February 1945, where the three leaders made an agreement regarding the end of World War II.
Good. Okay, we'll split this up a little bit, though. Stalin agrees to enter the war in the Pacific after Germany falls. Make sure you guys have that in your definition. That's a big idea. So that gives us another Allied partnership in the Pacific theater. Okay, and then eventually at the end of this, it also basically is a systematic plan for solving the end of the war as a whole. Excellent job. Any questions? These are available in your PR, textbook, and it will be available on the video, so we are going to keep moving. All-out war. Why would Britain and the United States need to ration the amount of consumer goods available?
Because the country needs supplies for the war.
Very good, and that's the biggest idea there. Now, this is that need versus want that we've talked about before. You need food to survive. You need shelter to survive. But you want these material items to make your existence more comfortable. But the country needs those industries making the items that you want to provide military supplies. Now, for example, your automotive industry during this time, halt the creation of certain lines of vehicles, and then instead they will create aircraft, or they create tanks and jeeps to use for conflict overseas. Toledo, actually just next door. If you ever go to the Toledo Zoo, you might see the sign that says Jeep Willys Parkway.
Yeah.
Okay, the Willys Jeep was huge during World War II. And that's an example of how we stop basically what we're doing for now and help the war effort.
Jeeps got their name because it was general purpose GP, and then they did JEE.
Nice. Excellent. What impact did the increased production have on the economy? Ms. Robinson?
It ended the unemployment of the Depression area.
Very good. Now this is going to basically solve this issue, but we can't forget about this, that social programming and economic plan that the United States put through, specifically President Roosevelt, President FDR. But ultimately, you have to understand that this war basically gave us that whole cause to expand and solve our economic woes at the time. What impact did women have on the total war effort?
Women around the world replaced men in essential war industry jobs, symbolized by character, ability to literature, and the United States built ships and planes and produced munitions.
Very good. A few things here. What does this word mean, immense? Let's go with our diction
like-
choice. Say it again.
Giant.
Giant, a lot, extremely important. Okay, that's where you guys can up your vocabulary here. Immense. They were critical in the production, obviously in the industrial sector. Morale, so basically the good feelings and staying positive back at home. You know, that we can do this. You know, hence this image here, which again is up on the ceiling top. As well as family-based effort at the time. Now there's also something that's going to be created during this time, and I want you to write this down. Victory gardens. Be like if you have a garden at home and you've always had one, that's not necessarily included, but if you create a garden to try to help, you know, food rationing back home. Right? That's something small that you as children and adolescents could have worked in with your parents and mom at home to help with the war effort. Okay? Continuing on. Why do you think aircraft carriers were such a vital part of the war effort? What do you guys think? Go ahead, Alex.
They could launch aircraft attacks without having to refuel as often because they were basically mobile aircraft bases.
Absolutely. Okay, they're able to do within reason what an entire air base could do on the ground. Okay? Then obviously if you're familiar with the geography of the Pacific Ocean, moving from even Pearl Harbor, just the west coast of the United States, all the way across the Pacific is quite a journey. There's no way that you could launch a bomber, at the time from San Francisco to mainland Japan. Not from where you're located. You have to try to get as close as you can within aeronautical miles. How did the following battles turn the tide for the Allies? What do you guys think? Go ahead.
Midway was fought entirely in the air. After Midway, Japan was unable to launch any more offensive operations.
Excellent. So we'll pause right there. After the Battle of Midway and Coral Sea, halted Japanese expansion in the Pacific. That's a big milestone for the Allied war effort. So we've got to make sure we have this because you're going to see these three specifically bullet points again in the objective. El Alamein and Stalingrad. Go ahead again.
The Allies finally halted the Desert Fox's advance, and Allies drove the Axis back across Libya and Tunisia.
Good, good. So it stops their advance in the Soviet Union and Africa. So between these two bullet points here, you can see the Axis powers have stopped expanding entirely. Okay? Now the only thing that you can do, other than just stay where you are, is contract. Okay? Invasion of Italy. What did this do for the Allied war effort? Alex?
It helped them gain land, capture land in Italy so they could build temporary bases.
Good, absolutely. Now, again, if you consider the geography of the Mediterranean Sea and Europe as a whole, one thing you also need to understand is this creates a third front. So write that down. We have the Western Front hailing in from France, the Eastern Front from the Soviet Union. Now we have a Southern Front coming up from Italy. You can't fight a two-front war. A third-front war is almost impossible. So now, we, between these bullet points here, have an example of how the Axis powers are all but going to retreat entirely. Any questions thus far? Excellent. Why did the Americans and the British wait till 1944 to invade? Mr. Hayes?
They weren't ready for the attack and they needed to prepare the military before they invaded.
Very good. Plain and simple, they're just not ready to take on the German military. We have an example for a few years now about how effective and strong they are. We're not ready. We need to make sure that we are as prepared as possible. It's like athletes in the room. You don't just enter a game saying, well, here we go, let's try to win this. You practice, okay? You make sure your athletes are healed. That way you can give it the best effort. Same theory here. You make sure that your military is strong enough to try to give it the best effort. How long did it take Allied forces to liberate Paris and all of France? Go ahead in the back.
A few months.
Good. A few months. 2.5 months to take Paris, 3.5 months to take the entire nation. Okay? That's pretty efficient. But you also have to understand during this time period they're being tested by strong military. So this is ultimately a huge victory for the Allied nations. Okay? What kinds of targets did the Allies bomb in Germany in 1944? Go ahead.
They targeted military bases, factories, railroads, oil depots, and cities.
Good. Okay, now we're going to separate it right here. Cities make sense as far as military bases, so the first and the last all make sense. But why the middle? What do you guys think? That's a pretty distinct difference. That's a large amount. Military bases are obvious, but why the middle? Rub?
Well, factories that would cancel the production of like weapons and stuff, and railroads is like transportation would be able to transport people.
Good.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. We're going to split these into 3 letters. Resources, factories, so you might want to write this in. If we can cripple your military's resources, you're not going to be able to fight an effective war. Now, transportation, if we can stop your movement of the resources, you're eventually going to suffer as a military as a whole. Well, during the industrial period, you also need oil to fuel all these things that you're waging war with. If we can wipe out all of your fuel, it's great if you have a wonderful tank, but if it doesn't have any gas in it, it's not going anywhere. Okay? These are strategic military engaging targets. Why was it important for the Allied leaders to meet up in early 1945? Go ahead.
They needed to create a plan on how to include Stalin after Germany surrendered.
Okay, good. Okay, they're closing in on Germany from both sides. The two-front war were being successful. Excellent. At that time, war in Europe was nearing an end. So we need to have a plan. Okay, that's a big idea there. Agree on a strategy to end the war and post-war arrangements. Now, one thing you guys need to understand, with Yalta here, which is what we're describing, okay, this conference is basically going to plan the war's end and the immediate reconstruction period. That's the biggest and most simple way to write that. Plans the war's end and the reconstruction of Europe afterwards. How can we solve this conflict as a whole so it never happens again? The big idea. Any questions? And these images here are from D-Day, as far as you can see what you're getting into. You can see faint cliff face up here. Can you guys see it?
Yeah.
The beach where the water's coming up. And basically this would be taken from a vantage point as you're a troop getting off this, sombering up the water here, and you can have a military turret up in these 3 locations shooting down onto you. Now, if you're a deer hunter in the room or any kind of a hunter, you know if you're elevated shooting down, you have a tactical advantage. Okay, whereas these people have to not only storm the beach and the cliff face, but shoot up the entire time. Okay, but we still took the beach and we're still successful. And this is a zoomed out feature from the cliff face looking down, as far as you can see everything coming in. Now, these things that you see up here are war balloons. Anyone ever heard of those before?
Yeah.
Newman, can you explain what they're for?
They're used to like distract the soldiers so you can get in there while they're shooting at them.
Absolutely. It's like basically you're trying to run under a shield of some form of cover, even though it's not going to take much to deflate the balloon. It's still a giant object in which people could run under and they can't see you. All right, it was successful, not to the perspective they thought it would, but it's still one of those things in the military that they use. Excellent. Objectives. Explain how nations devoted all of their resources to fighting World War II. Go ahead.
Factories were ordered to stop making cars or refrigerators in turn for airplanes or tanks. Food rations were spread. Women filled the jobs that men left behind, and money was raised for war bond.
Excellent. Okay. Now there are 3 points hailing from this, and you can substitute one of those for the rationing component if you guys would like. 2 points from your first bullet point. Women filled the jobs that men were previously held. And I want you to include for the second point, should this one appear, Rosie the Riveter. That's an icon. So what you've done there is you've given me an answer plus evidence. Okay? And that's something you all need to get into the practice of as you progress through high school. Answer plus evidence. All right? Many areas of the economy were militarized, which is what she said. Basically, we're eliminating that items you want to create items that the nation needs. All right? Many areas were militarized to provide war materials. Excellent. Explain how Allied victories began to push back the Axis powers. Go ahead.
They won wars along the Pacific, North Africa, and Italy, and the Soviet Union.
Good, good, good. And we're just going to provide the specifics now. Midway and Coral Sea, here's the one, your major point, you got to have this. Halted Japanese expansion. That's specific that the student provided. Absolutely. El Alamein and Stalingrad, Soviet Union in Africa. Okay? Stop Axis expansion to the furthest into the Soviet Union and Africa. Invasion of Italy created that third front. Okay? You will need all of these should this appear. So we'll spend a little bit of time here, and this will be available for you for a couple more minutes. We are going to progress down to the third one, but know that that'll still be there. Describe the D-Day and Allied advance toward Germany. Go ahead.
Invasion of France on June 6, 1944. They bombed industrial buildings and around-the-clock bombings.
Excellent. Beaches of Normandy, D-Day. Utilizing amphibious attack units and troops. Make sure we have that because that is how we're not just using artillery units from battleships out to sea. We're actually utilizing a mainland invasion. Now tomorrow, we're going to talk about why we can't do that in Japan. But here, we are able to do this. Allied forces bombed industrial and railroad targets to neutralize the military, which the student did provide. Excellent job. So gotta make sure we have that. Again, that's that. Resource, fuel, and transportation. If you can eliminate that, you can't wage war. Early 1945, Axis powers retreating, the result of a three-front war. That's our final point. Any questions? I'll come back to the slide so I can show you guys the homework slide, and we can end screencasting. What you guys got going on? The next QREV, as always, the next PR, 1 and 3 through 4 and 951, which many of you have already started. 1, 3 and 4, 951,